No president has ever shown less interest in the actual job of the presidency than Donald Trump, who, according to all available evidence, spends more time tweeting and playing golf than he does trying to pass legislation or manage American interest in the world's most difficult hotspots like North Korea, that just in effect murdered one of our citizens on President Trump's watch, and Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, where the president has apparently abdicated presidential decision-making and left day-to-day operations to military commanders. A Russian fighter jet intercepted a U.S. spy plane over the Baltic Sea, reportedly coming within just 5 feet of that aircraft on Monday. That incident happened on the same day the Russian Defense Ministry threatened to treat any American planes fighting ISIS in Syria as targets if they fly west of the Euphrates River. There was no response whatsoever from the President of the United States on that threat from the Russian Defense Ministry. Earlier today, an American fighter jet shot down an Iranian-made armed drone that was headed in the direction of American troops in southern Syria. This is the second such drone that U.S. military shot down this month. Foreign Policy magazine is reporting on the infighting within the Trump administration and the White House on what to do in Syria. The report says that 2 White House officials are now pushing to take wider action in Syria. But according to that report, Secretary of Defense James Mattis has personally shot down their proposals more than once. A former general has not had this much authority in the American government since Dwight Eisenhower was president.
I'm gravely concerned that we may be slipping into a hot war with Assad's forces, with Iran, or even with Russia. And we need a clear strategy from the Trump administration.
That was Senator Chris Coons of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee speaking today on Capitol Hill. Joining us now, Jeremy Bash, MSNBC national security analyst and a former chief of staff to Leon Panetta when he was the director of the CIA and Secretary of Defense at the Defense Department. Jeremy, what happens if the president simply says, you guys are in charge, defense secretary, everybody else concerned with our assets in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, it's up to you. You don't have to check with me, make any decisions you want.
Well, national security is a team sport, Lawrence. You need every player working together. You need the State Department working in concert with the Defense Department, working in concert with the uniformed military, working in concert with the intelligence community. And it should all be put together by the National Security Advisor, reporting up to the president as the commander-in-chief. So when every player doesn't work with each other, then there's a recipe for miscommunication and ultimately failure. And I would say, Lawrence, that there has never been a time more tense than this in the skies over Syria. Let's just focus on what happened. The Russians have essentially declared a no-fly zone. That was going to be our strategy, to deny Assad's forces, to deny the Russians the ability to attack our forces on the ground and those we're supporting in the campaign against ISIS. Instead, what they basically said is, you Americans, you have to keep your planes grounded west of the Euphrates. And it's really unclear at this hour, Lawrence, whether or not the president is going to stand for it. To this minute, we have heard nothing from the president about this problem.
Well, who likes this situation? I mean, I can imagine in Henry Kissinger's White House, if the president were to say, I have absolutely no interest in anything that happens on your watch, Henry Kissinger would have been thrilled. He would have been, in effect, president of foreign policy, president of all defense policy, because in what you just described, it all flows into the National Security Advisor. And if the National Security Advisor doesn't have to check with the president, doesn't the National Security Advisor on these matters, in effect, become president?
Yeah, but I don't know any National Security Advisor or Secretary of Defense, and I would bet Secretary Mattis and General McMaster are in this category. They don't want to operate as free agents. They don't want to operate without the input from the White House, the interagency. They are used to a normal, orderly national security process. They don't like freelancing. They want to have conversation. They want to have an organized foreign policy process, and they want buy-in from the commander-in-chief. They want an involvement by the president. So I actually think that they would want that. I think the problem is really a policy problem, which is that the president has to date been unwilling to push Russia out of the way in the skies over Syria. And as a result, what you've seen is you've seen Iranian drones, you've seen Syrian fighter aircraft coming to attack those forces on the ground that we are supporting. And we have troops on the ground in Syria. This is a very dangerous and delicate situation, and for the president basically to say, we're okay with Russia pushing us out of the way, I think that's unacceptable and harmful to our troops and our interests.
And we know when, according to reporting after the fact, that when we used the big bomb in Afghanistan that had never been used before, the president had pre-delegated the authority to make that decision without checking with him.
Yeah, but I gotta say, Lawrence, my sources tell me that the president was not involved in that decision at all. He took credit for it later because I think he thought it looked somehow macho, but he was not involved in that decision at all. Likewise, he was not involved in the decision at all to shoot down the Syrian aircraft, the Su-22 fighter that shot at the Syrian defense forces on the ground. The president wasn't involved in that at all. That was a decision made by the commander in the field, ultimately the Central Command Commander, General Votel, and ultimately the Secretary of Defense. And the president, again, has not been taking on the Russian forces, the Syrian air forces, and the Iranian air forces in the skies over Syria.
Jeremy, how would it have changed your job at the Defense Department, working for the Secretary of Defense, if you were sitting there waiting for presidential decisions that simply were not coming?
That would have been unacceptable. I mean, time matters. Again, when lives are on the line, you don't have a lot of time to waste. Some of this authority should be pre-delegated. The rules of engagement should be set forth to the Secretary of Defense and to the commanders on the ground. And then if there are any adjustments to make, you take that back to the National Security Council, have conversation in that interagency group, and ultimately take things to the president. If the president is not involved, or more specifically, if the president is unwilling to take the fight to Russia in the skies over Syria, again, that is a very dangerous situation.
Jeremy Bash, thank you for sharing your expertise and experience with us again tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.